Have you ever wondered who the most important person in history was? In my opinion, I think Isaac Newton was the most important person in history. I say this because of the laws he made. He has helped everyone understand a lot in the field of science and has gave us a lot of useful information. The law he has made was the law of motion, and I will explain that later in the speech. In this speech, I hope I will help you understand why Newton was so important and maybe grow your interest in his work. Many scientists would agree with my point that he is one of the most important human beings to ever live. In this speech, I will talk about all of Newton's discoveries, where he studied his work at, his work with gravity, and his discovery of calculus. Stanford.edu stated that Isaac attended Cambridge University. He started off studying Aristotelian rhetoric, logic, ethics, and physics. Newton spent all but 3 months from summer of 1665 until the spring of 1667 at his home in Woolsthorpe, when the university was closed because of the plague. During it, he made his initial experiment discoveries in optics and developed a mathematical theory of uniform circular motion. In this process, noted the relationship between the inverse square and Kepler's rule relating the square of planetary periods to the cube of their mean distance from the sun. Also during this time, he became the leading mathematician in the world. He returned to Trinity as a fellow in 1667, where he continued his research in optics, constructing the first reflective telescope in 1669, which is this. And that picture was from sciencemuseum.org. uchicago.edu said that the demonstration was so successful that Newton was elected to membership to the Royal Society immediately. Over the course of the next 15 years, as Lucasian Professor, Newton presented his lectures and carried on his research in a variety of areas. By 1671, he had completed most of a treatise length of calculus, which he then found no one would publish. In his years, he would study optics and further revolutionize our understanding of it. Newton.ac said in 1664, while still a student, Newton read recent work on optics and light by the English physicists Robert Boyle and Robert Hooke. He also studied both the mathematics and physics of French philosopher and scientist René Descartes. He found white light to be a mixture of infinity varied color rays, each ray definable by the angle through which it is reflected on entering or leaving a given transparent medium. Now I'll talk about the main reason I think he was the most important person in history. NASA.gov said Newton's first laws states that every object will remain at rest or in uniform motion in a straight line unless compelled to change its state by the action of external force. This is normally taken as a definition of inertia. The key point here is that if there are no net force acting on an object, then the object will maintain a constant velocity. The second law explains the velocity of an object changes when it is subjected to an external force. The law defines a force to be equal to change in momentum per change in time. The third law states for every action in nature, there is an equal and opposite reaction. In other words, if object A exerts a force on object B, then object B would also exert an equal force on object A. The third law can be used to explain the generation of lift by a wing and production of thrust by a jet engine. In this speech, I have talked about where he studied and what he has studied, his work with optics and his laws. I will always think of Isaac Newton as one of the most important persons to ever walk this earth. Isaac Newton has taught us what really happens in our daily life. Now you know what I think. Now you know who I think is the most important person ever.